Welcome. Just as you're getting settled, we're troubleshooting a little snafu that happened in internet land for Paul, in that his internet company decided to do a procedure on their internet and turned it off for the at 3 o'clock. So he is in his vehicle, being a traveling teacher, and we're going to give him oodles of room to be a little bit off balance as he was trying to drive around and find some internet. And he's connected with his phone and his laptop because his laptop may run out of juice, and then he'll switch over to his phone. But hopefully we'll be through the slideshow before his battery dies. So this is the real world. As we all know, technology can be a real pain in the patoot, but that makes it fun, right? It's the adventure. And we're so glad to have you, Paul. All right, so let's get started. Everybody ready to officially start our program? Essential Foods for Health. Welcome to Essential Foods for Health. I'm here. I really am. I'm thinking about a lot of things all at once. So I want to welcome you all here and invite you to introduce yourself in the chat, or put something in the chat that you're hoping to learn today, or why you're here. Maybe it's because you've listened to Paul in the past and you enjoy learning from him. I know I'm in that group. That's obviously why I invited him to be here. So if you're new to BotanicWise, my name is Cara Slindruth, and I'm the founder and organizer of BotanicWise. I've created this educational platform offering online and now in-person again events, bringing some of the brightest herbal minds together to create a collaborative and authentic learning experience, one that you can really trust. So welcome, everybody. I wanted to just give you a heads up about the way the evening is going, or the webinar is going to unroll. I understand it's not evening for everybody, but it is evening here in Pennsylvania. So we are going to invite Paul to share his wisdom, and he's going to give a presentation on essential foods for health. So he's going to really give you something to get started with today. If you do learn nothing more from him, he's going to give you some pearls of wisdom to get you started improving your health right away. And then we'd like to take a moment to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions for Paul, and hopefully he'll still have battery one way or the other. If you're coming in late, he's a little short on internet connectivity. He's in his car on his laptop and his phone. So we're going to hope that this unrolls really well. But we hope to have some time for Q&A. Before we do that, we're going to introduce his brand new 6-week program that we're hosting on BotanicWise. I'm going to share with you why I asked him to come teach this 6-week program. I'm really excited about it. So that is part of our agenda as well tonight. So if you stick around till after his presentation, you can learn more about that. And if you need to go before that, I totally understand. The replay and the notes or the slides will be available tomorrow. Give us patience while we upload the recording. It takes a little bit, but you'll get an email with a link to the replay and have access to that as long as you need it. So I would like to introduce our special guest, my friend. He's only been an internet friend for me, but I still want to give him a big hug. And this is Paul Bergner. If you have not listened to Paul speak, he has one of the most soothing and comforting voices I've ever heard. I used to listen to his audio recordings as I drove around, and my daughter and I would get very relaxed, which is maybe not the way you want to be when you're driving, but we learned a lot at the same time. So Paul is a medical herbalist. He's a clinical nutritionist. He's an educator. He's an author and a naturalist. He's the director of the North American Institute of Medical Herbalism and is core faculty at the Acorn School of Herbal Medicine and the Southern Institute of Medical Herbalism in New Zealand. He has studied and practiced natural medicine, nutrition, and medical herbalism since 1973, when I was in maybe third grade, and has published and edited the Medical Herbalism Journal since 1989. So without further ado, Paul, we're going to hand things over to you so you can get started before your battery runs out.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for making the effort to find some connectivity so you could be here.
I wouldn't miss it. I always love to hear myself talk. Yeah. So hello, everyone. Here's my face in my car. Why don't I move to my slides right away? And here they come. Yeah. Share screen. There they are. Okay. Share. Okay. And then view. We did the dry run on this a little while ago. Here we go. That should work. Do people have the full slides there showing on a full screen?
Looks good, Paul.
Okay, great. Then I will. It's nourished foundations of herbal nutrition. I will say where this material came from is I started practicing natural medicine for myself, but then also very soon was teaching classes in medical self-care, drugless medical self-care in 1973, right? And I had experimented and explored different diets over that time. I was vegetarian for a while, vegan toward the end of that, and different fad diets. And but I really started a serious study of nutrition. But what I want to emphasize from the start, I was observing the effects of diet in people. I wasn't joining a club or aspiring to one theory or something like that. It's like a gardener. If you can go to a soil scientist and they might be able to tell you something about plants. But if you go to a gardener who's grown their garden every year for 50 years, they can tell you something about how to grow a garden and how to get results, right? And so I have been gardening people's digestive tracts with food ever since 1973 and watching the results. So 1996, which I guess that's 27 years ago, I started running a teaching clinic for basically nutrition and medical herbalism. And our nutrition focuses on dietetics, not focuses on big fancy supplements like you'd get at your functional medicine doc or something like that. So we focus on diet. We do use some supplements and recommend some supplements, and I'll be talking about them during the course. But mainly our focus is, let's just call it diet as medicine. And that's the motivation for this course. This is not the little league. It isn't like drugs are the big league or herbs are the big league and diet is just the secondary poor minor leagues or the little leagues or something, right? The diet is the main thing. The diet is the main driver of your health, your constitution. And so that's my motivation for doing this, because you tonight, with what I'm going to offer you tonight, can do something that will improve your health tonight and possibly incorporated it into your diet and lifestyle. Could change the basic level of health. So I'm interested here in, this isn't just food as fad, this is food as medicine. We're talking about correcting illnesses, and we're talking about preventing illnesses. I would say this course, together with the other BotanicWise course we do on food intolerance, that these two together would constitute what has been called since the ancient times food as medicine, which is centered on dietetics. So that's what we're talking about tonight. Okay. And this is another thing. This is from the Hippocratic Corpus. This was actually this thing we talk about Hippocrates. Hippocrates as an author is a myth. Hippocrates never wrote anything. There was a library, and that 300 years after his death, they moved to Alexandria and they put his name on all the books, right? So the scholars today think that Hippocrates didn't actually write anything. But in that group of writings, this is a book that was written 500 years before he was born. It says there, this is one of the main treatises in the Hippocratic corpus. It says, this is their translation, the reason the art of medicine arose, right? This art of healing arose was because it was observed that the food that was good for one might be poison for another. The milk may be nourishing for one and cause disease in another. One person could digest a lot, another only a little. And the quest of medicine is to find the specific diet that produces health and balance in each individual, in each stage, season, and each stage of life. So what I'm doing here, I'm not selling the Paul Bergner diet tonight, right? I'm selling tools for you to explore and find your diet, right? The diet for you. And this is one of the quests of life. This is a life skill, is to find out the diet that supports your health. And each person, it's going to be a little bit different. So yeah, enough said. Okay. You said that 500 BC, that person said that. Each person has a specific diet. So here now, we live in a modern era, and we tend to think that whatever diseases people have today, people always had, or else hunter-gatherers all died when they were 35, so they never had time to develop them. Does that sound familiar? Familiar with that idea, right? Well, it turns out there's lots of studies of hunter-gatherer health, and hunter-gatherers and many people, not just hunter-gatherers, other people following a traditional diet didn't get any of the major modern diseases we have today. And what this implies, this implies is that if we could change our diet, we could get rid of or prevent most of the modern diseases of today, right? That's the implication. So I'm going to give you more information on that. But first, the story of the golden monkey, right? And this is the golden monkey. This is in the second half of the 20th century. Golden monkey is a beautiful monkey, and they love to have golden monkeys in zoos, right? But to get a golden monkey, you have to go like trap it in the wild and pay first class on an airplane to get it home or something like that. And then you have it. And then it turns out golden monkeys wouldn't reproduce in captivity. So they would love it if they could get a mating pair of golden monkeys with lots of little golden monkey babies running around, and they wouldn't have to go to Africa or Central America or wherever they kidnap them out of the jungle and get their golden monkeys. So this was a conundrum, and this was a key study in the history of primatology, right? A woman, her question was, I wonder what golden monkeys eat in their natural environment. So she went and studied and found out what they ate. And they started feeding the diet of what they ate in their normal habitat in the zoo, and they started having babies, right? Okay, so this is an argument for primates need to eat a primate-specific diet, okay, in order for optimal health. In this particular case, I like to tell that story in when I teach female reproductive therapeutics in herbal school. I say, okay, well, that monkey didn't need Vitex agnus castus in order to have a baby. They needed to have their diet corrected, right? And this is true for humans as much as for other people. Okay, so what I say is we are a civilization of primates who've strayed from the natural pattern of their diet, which has resulted in what we call diseases of civilization. Okay. Here is this is the diseases. It's called, where is it? I have, let's see this. The Western diseases. These are this is a whole scholarly level medical study that emerged in the second half of the 20th century. And what happened was British trained medical missionaries, right, went to Africa, and one particular pair of them lived there for their whole careers. They lived there for 30 years. They started a medical school in Uganda, And but there was there was a journal of colonial medicine for doctors who were practicing with indigenous people in Africa, right? And they were absolutely baffled that the people there didn't get any of the diseases that they were trained to treat, right? Like any, right? So they decided, this launched a whole field of study called Western disease study. It's actually started in the 30s, and it culminated in a book that I'm going to show you the results of. But what they did is they looked at medical anthropologists working in more than 17 different indigenous communities in different parts all around the world, right? Polynesians, Native Americans, Africans, South Americans, etc. And they asked a question. They gave them a list of diseases, and they said, is this disease rare or non-existent in people who follow their traditional diet and lifestyle? Okay. And then they say, okay, is this are these common and causes of death or disease in developing countries? Right? Yeah. And the clincher, do they begin to appear in traditional people when they adopt the Western diet? Right? This is as close as you can come to an actual double-blind anthropological trial, right? There's a logic to it, okay? And so see if you can guess what are some of the diseases on that list that have never been seen in traditional people. Huh? Here. There you go. There they are. This is the dirty list that these authors gave this list to uh, a group of more than 20 medical anthropologists working with traditional people, and they asked those questions about these diseases. Never been seen: hypertension, obesity, diabetes, gallstones, stroke, right? Coronary heart disease, varicose veins. Look at these: constipation, never been seen. Appendicitis, right? Hemorrhoids, never been seen. The autoimmune diseases, never been seen. Cancers: breast cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, never seen in a traditional Homo sapiens following their natural diet, their indigenous diet. And I'm not talking about going back 2.4 million years to the apes. I'm talking about going back to mid 20th century, people following a traditional diet in the mid 20th century. I'm not going to go further into that. The point I want to make is you're not going to. These things are all an invitation to find out what that indigenous traditional diet was, what its major components were, what its proportions of macronutrients and micronutrients were, how that fit in with a lifestyle. Because those are going to be the roots of these diseases, are going to primarily be dietetic. Okay. We also have in this disease, one of the pioneers in this study of comparing traditional diet to modern diet was Weston Price in the 1930s. He traveled around the world, photo documenting the dental and the bony health of people around the world. And he would say, fine, here's an African tribe following a traditional diet. Here's one eating out of the trading post. And then they shows the pictures of their dental health and their bony health. And here is these are reprinted with permission from the Weston Price Foundation in my book, Nutrition, Healing Power of Minerals. These are Eskimos, okay? These are Eskimos eating traditional diet. These are Eskimos eating out of the trading post. You can see teeth and bones, okay. This woman chipped a tooth here, but this woman delivered more than 20 babies. Right? You can imagine a modern person who would even be able to do that, right? So, okay, here is, we have some more. These are African tribes. These are neighboring tribes. They're the same culture, the same genetics. Well, these are following a traditional diet. These are eating out of the trading post, right? These are eating commercial processed foods, sugars, and bad oils, okay? This is Polynesians, and you get the same pattern there. Okay, I like to say a picture is worth way more than 1,000 words. A picture can change your whole paradigm for the rest of your life, right? How are these people going to be treated if not by dietetics, right? The root here is diet, okay? Because okay, This is another one. These are two brothers in the Outer Hebrides Islands. The brothers eating the traditional foods, the younger brothers eating the sugar and the processed food out of the trading post. You can see the difference in their health. Now, these, on the other hand, there was a woman who, according to her own report, she looked like the after pictures here. She had deficient small jaw, bad dental health, and all that. But she had learned this. She changed her diet. During her pregnancy, she ate very, very well. And she had these children and raised them. And I like to say, I can sort of steal here, raised them with the kind of thing I'm teaching in this program. Okay. And you can look, they look fine. Okay. They look like the before pictures. Even though their mother wasn't healthy, because she ate well during pregnancy and fed them well, they look really good. Okay. I don't think those have been airbrushed here. Okay. So here, I want to show here, we have the idea that, oh, we're the best fed population in the world or something like that. No, our diet, because of processing and agriculture and other things, most Americans are deficient in multiple essential nutrients, and this contributes to our suffering here. Uh, I could start with magnesium. I can talk more about that too. About 80% of our population doesn't get the recommended daily allowance of magnesium. Okay. Half of our population gets less than half of that. Okay. And I'll add that probably the recommended dietary allowance should be about 25% more than it is, right? So in other words, um, uh, almost everybody needs magnesium. Now, I'll tell you what this looks like in real life. What this looks like in our clinical practice, I learned this from a mentor back in the 90s. It said, oh, yeah, when in doubt, when your patient comes in, they're complicated, give them some magnesium, have them come back in 2 weeks and see what went away, right? I thought, oh, okay, well, let me try that. I've been doing that ever since. Somebody comes through my door, I assume they have a magnesium deficiency. I give them some magnesium. They feel better when they come back and they say, what else do you have to offer me, right? No, this is, what happens is magnesium participates in so many processes in your body. I'll mention a few of them, but that if you're deficient in it, you have multiple processes going wrong, right? So I'll just mention some of them. Number one, when muscles cramp and then contract and then relax because of a balance between calcium and magnesium, right? If you don't have enough calcium, the muscles contract too easily and they won't relax back if you're magnesium deficient. Now, in the full program, I'm going to show you the cell level slides of what's going on there. But in this particular thing, cramps, menstrual cramps, abdominal cramps, stiff neck, chiropractic syndrome, stiff neck, right? General muscle tension all throughout the body. Magnesium, you go, right? I taught nutrition to underclassmen at Naropa University over 7 years. And I have to say, between the two of magnesium and fish oil, I was able to witness college-age women experiencing their first pain-free menses. Usually 4 or 5 or 6 students every year got to experience their first pain-free menses by taking magnesium and fish oil. So this is magnesium is sleep, insomnia, stress, anxiety, depression, fatigue, brain fog, right, is a symptom of magnesium deficiency, right? Because the place of magnesium in energy production, I'm just going to go right to the science on it. Your high energy molecule is called ATP, right? It's adenosine triphosphate, right? And in the cell, you eat your food, the energy from your food gets transferred to this ATP molecule, which is a high energy molecule, right? So when you need a reaction to happen in the cell goes, oh, give me some energy, plug me into that ATP, right? And the energy is transferred and the thing goes on. Okay. That includes your cognitive processes, by the way. And so the ATP that A is called adenosine, and it's a molecule, and it has 3 phosphate bonds on it. This isn't over anybody's head. This is easy, right? So what happens is you have the adenosine, you want to make your high energy molecule. It takes a little bit of energy to put the first phosphorus on. It takes a little bit more energy to put the second phosphorus on. And it takes a whole lot of energy to put the third phosphorus on the adenosine molecule. This is your molecule. And do you know what glue holds that bond together is a magnesium molecule. So if you're deficient in magnesium, you're going to be deficient in ATP, right? And it's very readily noticeable. You can see people just do a basic magnesium supplement over 5 to 7 days, their energy level comes up because they're able to make and stabilize more ATP when they do that. So we'll have a whole section on magnesium and its companion calcium. They work together in the program. Okay. Vitamin B6 and the other B vitamins, 75% of the population doesn't get the RDA of vitamin B6. Okay. Vitamin D, there's arguments about what optimal levels of vitamin D are, but at least 60% of people are grossly deficient by anybody's standards in vitamin D, the majority of our population, right, for that. So, okay. We have essential fatty acids. This is basically the fish oil types. And I'll say in our program, I'm going to go do details on each one of these. Protein, we're going to talk about protein today. Chromium, a mineral that helps prevent diabetes and insulin resistance. Okay. Antioxidants, these mainly come from brightly colored foods in the diet. Okay. And then trace elements, those are the very small minerals required in very small amounts. So the average, I train my clinical students, the average person that walks through your door, this is what they look like, right? And so the average person needs to have something to correct each one of these or most of these, okay? So we come up with a generic protocol, like we like people to get some magnesium, some B vitamins, some essential fatty acids, etc., at least to start out their case. And then, meanwhile, we're training them and teaching them how to have a very robust, nutrient-dense whole foods diet. And this is the approach that we're going to do in the program also. And we'll have lists of these. For instance, when we do the magnesium class, I'll have a list of foods that are high in magnesium, right? And the same when we have essential fatty acids, foods high in essential fatty acids. So our program is going to be, it's not a pill pushing program. It's the foundation of it is going to be dietetics. Okay. Yeah. So without further, okay. All right. We'll go right into the protein. This is our main offering today. When we talk about protein, when we get in the alternative health field, there's this idea that protein is in some way toxic, that too much protein's bad for you. And I can say I was a missionary vegetarian for about 11 or 12 years of my life, and I used to teach that. And I like to say in my life, my study with dietetics, my karma ran over my dogma, like what happened to me and in my clinical work, what happened to people in the clinic and what happened in the communities of people around me, right? My karma ran over my dogma, right? And I've had to gradually unlearn and learn new things about nutrition. Nice thing about having done that for 50 years is you end up learning a lot and correcting a lot of mistakes. So here, and I want to emphasize again, there's no one diet that's best for everybody, right? But we have protein requirements, right? You need our ancestors all got a lot of protein, right? And so here, I just like to say, from a clinical point of view, I train herbalists, right? So much of this material I use to train herbalists in nutrition. So I like to sneak it into the herbal paradigm here. If protein were an herb, okay, it would be a chi tonic, a blood tonic, an immune tonic, an adaptogen, it would be antidepressant, it would help build connective tissue, it would be protective to the bones, and it would promote liver detoxification. Man, can you imagine if we had the latest wonder herb from some strange rainforest that did all of that? Well, oh my gosh, right? Somebody could make $1 billion, you know? But here we go. This is the good old-fashioned protein, which has been there all along, and it does all that. So the way I work with my students, we say until somebody has established an optimal protein intake, it's best to target that first before you're using a bunch of herbs to do these other things that would actually be corrected with by optimizing protein. So this is food for optimal health, right? Okay. Here, this is what people who get suboptimal. Now, I'm not going to call this, they're protein starvation, right? It isn't deficiency. It's not optimal. There's a certain amount of protein where people, well, I feel good, right? My neurotransmitters are humming. My liver detox is humming because I have enough of the protein I need to make all those. My lean muscle mass is healthy, etc. So, but this is what it looks like. Fatigue, depression, loss of muscle mass, or this is common in some of the younger males I treat, failure of muscles to respond to training exercise. People go to the gym and try to buff up and nothing happens, right? Suboptimal protein can cause that. Okay. This is this is called the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle is where we make our energy. It's where we get our ATP. And I'm just real quickly, I'll show the role of protein in this. Is here your food, you had fat, starch, sugar, or protein, fatty acids, whatever. And that's their energy is transferred to this one high energy molecule here. This high energy molecule binds with a low energy molecule to make a high energy molecule, okay, citrate. And then with each step, this thing gives up some of its energy to make some ATP. Each step, it makes some more ATP. Over here, one of them, it makes a whole lot of ATP. Whoops, having trouble here. Until you get back to a low energy molecule. So this high energy molecule, through these substrates, gave all its energy to ATP molecules. Well, so where do the substrates come from? They come from protein, right? So the people with suboptimal protein have suboptimal energy production. And this is why brain fatigue and brain fog are can be symptoms of suboptimal protein on that. Okay. I'm not going to go into details here. Protein and amino acids are absolutely essential for the immune cells to make the immune cells. And functional immunity functionally declines as protein nourishment declines in people. So this is very famous. We have our antidepressants. We have antidepressants. Here we have, for instance, our Prozac class of drugs. They affect serotonin. That's one of our neurotransmitters in the brain, right? We also have dopamine and norepinephrine and epinephrine in the brain. Then we also have GABA in the brain. And so these are neurotransmitters, and the brain is a complex interplay of stimulants and suppressors and all of that, of these different neurotransmitters. So the drugs, when we take antidepressant drugs, they're aimed at pharmacologically manipulating these neurotransmitters. And uh-oh. For some reason, my watch started feeding my voice back. All right, that should stop. So anyway, where do neurotransmitters come from? Neurotransmitters come from proteins, right? They come from amino acids. So they come from amino acids. The protein is made up of 8 essential amino acids. Okay, Now, these amino acids like tryptophan, tyrosine, glutamate, they go through chemical process to be transformed into your neurotransmitters. Okay, so the suboptimal protein, you end up with suboptimal production of one or more of the neurotransmitters there. One of the chief ones is because tryptophan is the least common amino acid in protein. Tryptophan is most likely to become deficient, and serotonin is most likely to become deficient. So now we have a whole pharmaceutical class of drugs to kick your serotonin back up when possibly you should just increase your daily protein by 20 or 30%, and that would solve the problem. This is sort of a joke, but it's not a joke. This is the reality of neurotransmitters. Um, this is what's in the chemistry book. L-tryptophan, by the action of tryptophan hydroxylase, makes 5-HT. 5-HT decarboxylase makes serotonin, etc. This is the pathway. So the pharmacologist said, oh, you're deficient in serotonin. Let's do something to artificially stimulate the serotonin at the local level. I like to say, this is a pathway in a book. This is the pathway in reality over here. So let's just say, let's say steak and eggs. I mean, it could be beans, okay, and tempeh or whatever, but you have protein from foods. It's acted on in your digestive tract, right? And that's inhibited by acid blocking drugs, by stomach inflammation secondary to food intolerance, by non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, chronic indigestion, or intestinal inflammation. It inhibits the breakdown of the protein to the amino acid. Okay, and you get some L-tryptophan. Its absorption is blocked by non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, antibiotics, and chronic inflammation. Okay, and that's acted on to make 5-HT, but that's dependent on micronutrients, specifically B6, magnesium, and zinc, right, which many people are deficient in, okay? And then this is the last step to make serotonin is more dependent on micronutrients, right? So rational medicine would be, oh, let's stop taking these drugs that are blocking the pathway to make healthy levels of neurotransmitters. Let's stop taking those drugs. Let's, from our other class on food intolerance, let's reduce intestinal inflammation. Okay, let's make sure the micronutrients are there, the zinc, the magnesium, and the B6. And then we should have plenty of serotonin and we wouldn't have to worry about taking a pharmacological approach. And I would like to mention that all those steps would also create many, many other benefits, not just more serotonin in there. Okay, so I'm pointing out the difference between a pathway on paper and a pathway in the reality of life. And too much of what is today we talk about as natural medicine is based on pathways on paper, and it's not based on actually empirically what happens in a clinical setting. So here, okay. Optimizing nutrition with whole protein containing all the essential and non-essential amino acids feeds the neurotransmitters in a balanced way. Okay, and this is my argument against just, oh, why not just pop tryptophan? Okay, well, you pop tryptophan, you might drive that pathway too much, and then another pathway might suffer. So why don't you just take them all together in optimal amounts, and then you'll end up automatically with all of them at optimal levels when you're done. All right. I'm going to address, these are some common myths about protein nutrition. Let's see, where are we? You know what? I'm going to let you read these slides on your own so we can move forward. You don't need to, if you're not eating a whole protein, right? If you're a vegetarian, this is a concern because you can eat corn, for instance, but it's not a whole protein, or beans are not a whole protein. But if you have corn and beans together, that is a whole protein, right? So that's what we're talking about here. This was a fear when I was young and early vegetarian. They used to say, oh, you have to eat your corn and your beans together at the same meal. No, you just have to be sure you're eating some corn and some beans over the course of a few days or a week. You don't need to be obsessive about that if anyone's concerned about that. This is the other one. We have the myth that eating protein or eating meat or a protein especially, it acidifies the blood, it ruins your acid-base balance, and it causes your bones to deteriorate. Right? Acidify the blood and the bones deteriorate. This is, I was concerned about this myself when I switched from vegetarian to eating more meat. And so I actually have become something of an expert because I looked up every single trial I could find on that subject out of my own concern and wonder about that for myself, my patients, and my students. And it turns out whenever they did a study of bone health of a meat eater and compared it to a vegetarian or a vegan, in some cases, the vegetarian or vegan's bones were as healthy as the meat eater. And in some, the meat eater was more healthy, but in not one single one of those trials was the vegetarian or vegan have healthier bones than the meat eater, right? So this is an argument against the idea that eating meat damages the bones. And I could explain, a long class about why that doesn't happen. But these are some references here. These were meta-analysis. They looked at 36 randomized controlled trials and found no adverse effect of higher protein on bones, and there were actually positive trends to make the bones more healthy with more protein. Okay. And this is important to address because it's so prominent. People have the acid alkaline theory. So like vegetable foods alkalinize your blood, and proteins and meat acidifies your blood. And so if you eat too much meat relative to vegetables or proteins, it acidifies the blood, it causes chronic disease and causes your bone to deteriorate, right? And this, I know that as far as I can find in my research, that theory first emerged in the late 1880s with a naturopath in Germany. And then it came into naturopathic traditions in North America and was spread around. Now, their idea then was that the blood has to be a certain acidity or you die, right? And it's a very narrow range. Their thought was that what determined that was the balance of your diet, right? And it turns out subsequently over the 20th century, they found out, well, no, actually.
Can you hear me on my phone?
Yeah, and you can see the slideshow. You just got to let me know when to progress to the next slide.
Yeah, it looks like I got kicked off the internet, and I have some battery left, but I somehow got kicked off the internet. So I'll continue. If you can forward the slides, I'll continue. Okay.
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah, so it turns out that the acidity of the blood is very rigidly controlled by the urinary buffer and the lung buffer. You end up excreting more carbon dioxide, which affects carbonic acid and reduces acidity in the blood. And it goes both ways. If your blood becomes more alkaline, you pee out less acid you retain more acid at the urinary tract, and likewise at the lung. So this was an old theory. I will say, empirically, what those people observed was if people ate a whole lot of meat and starch and sugar, sugar had become a staple food by the time that theory came along, and didn't eat many vegetables, they got sick. So they interpreted that phenomenon as it must be an acid thing. So empirically, we see the same thing in our clinics. We want people to eat 8 to 10 servings of vegetables a day, and find people that start skimping on vegetables, people become less healthy. And I think this is the phenomenon people observed, and then they attributed that to acid alkaline. So I could have the next slide. Good. Now this is sort of for people who want to demonize protein. This is really a curveball. Protein and liver detoxification is the liver. Each cell in the liver has multiple pathways to detoxify substances and get rid of them, right? And I like to think of those pathways like turnstiles in a superstore, you know, as that you have these things are being checked out, being transformed on the way out, they're being detoxified, right? But then it all depends on whether the cashier showed up that day, right? So certain things will speed up those lines or slow down those lines. And what it turns out is suboptimal protein depresses liver detoxification, right? Optimizing liver protein nutrition optimizes liver detoxification along with other cofactors. Next slide. I think I have some details on that. This is one they did in humans. They did studies, and they suboptimal protein inhibited the pathways by between 20 and 40% on there. And there's a trial below. They increased the daily protein from 10% to 20% and increased the liver clearance. We routinely try to get all our patients to have more than 20% of their calories from protein, and we see remarkable results. I will say this is not just theoretical. We see people, the key is a high protein breakfast. They get a high protein breakfast and they go, oh my goodness, I don't crash mid-morning. I've lost my sugar cravings. Oh, I'm not even hungry till lunch. Oh my goodness, right? And then we increase protein overall. And people say, oh my goodness, I just feel so good. And why do you feel so good? Your neurotransmitters are optimal. Your liver detox is optimal, right? Your energy production is optimized, right? So this is critical. But the word protein, right? The derivation, it comes from of first importance in nutrition. From the time they named it, they recognized it's of first importance in nutrition is protein. Next slide, please. Okay. These are trends. Now, I'm going to summarize some of this really quickly. I have a nutrition book from the 1930s. And in the 1930s, they didn't know, they only knew 4 essential nutrients, and they don't know how much to recommend. So they did surveys, and they just recommended that people get what the average person got. In the 1930s, they said, well, the average person in America gets between 100 and 150 grams of protein a day. So that's what we recommend, get between 100 and 150 grams of protein a day. So some scientists got a hold of that, and they said, well, how much do you need? And what they meant was, how much do you need before you start digesting your own protein, right? And so they found out you needed a certain amount, and that's how they set what's still today, the current RDA. It was set at how much do you need to keep from digesting yourself, right? And the big shift in protein research occurred around the year 2000, and they were giving people more or less protein. They're looking for clinical outcomes, you know, not digesting yourself. How much does an 80-year-old need to consume in order to prevent developing frailty in their other years? That kind of thing, right? So, they concluded there were convocations in this country in 2007 and 2015. There was a gathering of the protein scholars of the world. These are all PhD level protein nutrition researchers. And they issued a consensus statement that the RDA that's currently published was not sufficient to get optimal clinical outcomes in patients. Consensus, that means every single one of them signed off on it. And most of the world hasn't gotten the memo, right? At the follow-up conference they had in 2015, they issued their recommendation for how much the average person should have and how much a person under stress or chronic illness should have. And we can see the next slide. I'll say here, this was the old RDA. DRI is RDA is Recommended Dietary Allowance. So this is how they put it. It's all scientific. Use 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. That adds to a certain amount of grams per pound of body weight. And there's the amounts in some different foods that are there. And here today, even you'll hear repeated today, the dietary requirement for protein is 0.8 of a gram per kilogram. No, it was originally stated that this was the range that people needed. And they said specifically the reason they had 1.2 in there, which is 50% more, right? The reason they had that is because for people who were exercising, building muscle mass, elders facing frailty, people with chronic disease, people with chronic fatigue, people under chronic stress needed the higher amount. They needed 50% more. Okay, so the trend now is that even this range, 0.8 to 1.2 grams, is insufficient for the average person to for optimal health and optimal clinical outcomes. And next slide, please. The next slide, please. Are we still hooked up? Am I still on this webinar?
Yeah, you're still here. You see a history of protein recommendations?
Yeah, there you go. Okay, and then we like the one after that. Great. This is the current 2015. This is current recommendations that the average active healthy adult needs 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram. Now notice this starts, the lower level starts at what the previous higher level was, okay? But just as with the RDA, which has a normal amount and an amount for people under stress who need more, or chronic disease need more, they show the adult building muscle mass, you can see it's significantly a whole lot more over there. And so, okay, now we're going to come back to to I'm not haven't joined a club. I'm not an advocate for one particular thing over another. I accept that everyone should find what suits them the best. But I can say we started doing this, especially with an intervention of a high protein breakfast. We started doing that in our teaching clinics from the very first year in 1996. And I have seen many thousands of students and patients who introduced a high protein breakfast, and experienced a positive change in their health. And this is mine. If I have a complex patient in front of me, there's about 2 or 3 things I do to figure things out. I mentioned before, I'll have them take some magnesium, see if they're willing to take a high protein breakfast, and then you watch the shift in their health when they come back. It's the most potent single intervention I know of. And I will also say, I wrote a book about Chinese tonic herbs in 1997, and I could talk a whole book length worth of stuff about adaptogens. If I had all the adaptogens and Chinese tonic herbs in one hand, and I had a high protein breakfast and higher protein overall in the other, I would choose the protein over the tonic herbs because the protein has the effects that we want to get from those tonic herbs. Now, of course, I'm an herbalist, so I'm going to keep the herbs also, but that's to make a point. Next slide. The other discovery they made was that it isn't just how much protein you have at over the day, it's that you need a certain threshold of protein per meal in order to get the optimal benefits from the protein. And they did a lot of research into this. And here they had there, for instance, younger people don't need as much, up to 25 grams, right? Elders need more than 25 grams, and so on. And we have, since 1996, we've basically advised for most of our patients and our students that they get a breakfast of 25 to 35 grams of protein most mornings. And like I said, I've witnessed transformations of health with that intervention alone. So that you would get your money's worth for the class here if you benefited from that yourself. Okay, next slide. This is for you to keep food sources and amounts of protein in different things. In the next slide. For the vegetarians, it's perfectly possible to get protein in a vegetarian diet. And there you can see the higher or lower protein foods there. Okay. And the next slide. This was a chart of, this is the various stages of life across the top. And this was Americans below the RDA of protein. Now, remember, the RDA of protein is low by today's standards. And you see for the males are at the bottom, females are at the top. For females, it dances right around half of females are getting less than the RDA of protein, right? And with males, especially, you get up to the elders, and you start, everybody's up around 50% up there. So this is common in our society. Next slide. This is more recent. They did the statistics in 2003. 90% of individuals consumed at least the old minimum RDA of protein, right? So people felt pretty comfortable about that. And then some people looked at it from the other point of view, is that at the USDA publishes their food pyramid, and they say how much protein you ought to get. And it's actually a whole lot more protein on the food pyramid. And by their standards, right, 3/4 of the population of the US fails to meet the recommended dietary amounts of protein on the food pyramid. And okay, next slide. This is protein in the frail elderly. This was one of the breakthrough kind of trials that shifted the whole paradigm. They said, oh my gosh, we're giving people the upper limit of the RDA and it's making no difference whatsoever on their muscle mass, right, in elders. So this was a clinical trial, and they gave people either 0.8 or 1.2 or 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. And the result was the effect on the muscle mass were low, very few effects at either 0.8 or 1.2 and no difference between them, right? But at 1.5 grams per kilogram, this is in 80-year-olds here now, right? The 1.5 gram group had 500% of increase in muscle mass compared to the lower groups and had a doubling in gait speed. So this kind of trial is what shifted the paradigm. People say, well, how can, look, we gave them the old RDA, low and high, and it had no effect. We had to go much higher in order to affect the muscles there. Okay, so next slide. This is, they did a study in elders, and what they didn't measure how much protein they had overall. Well, I mean, they did, but what they looked at was, did they have what was the highest protein meal they had during the day, right? And they found, if you can read on there, I actually, oh, I can here. The optimal protein doses per meal, the highest meal of the day, were 30 to 35 grams in men, 35 to 50 in women to get the good outcomes. Okay. And also in women, a higher number of protein providing snacks was associated with better hand grip strength and knee extension, right? And the outcomes were unrelated to the number of protein containing meals. So this is that value of having at least one, but preferably 3 high protein meals in a day for optimal health. Okay. Okay, and next slide. This is our general protocol. I'd say why I get a lot of clinical results is because I make all my students do whatever they're going to ask their clients to do when they get into the clinic. So I've seen, I have about 400 clinical graduates now. So I've watched every one of them over 2 years of their training change their diet and seen what the effects were. And of course, they watched each other also, so they all learn in that way. But this is a basic protocol: consume 90 to 140 grams of protein per day for optimal metabolism. Consume 120 to 180 grams of protein per day if building or maintaining muscle mass, as in athletics, chronic disease, or the elderly. Okay. And this is one: eat 80% of daily protein at the breakfast and lunch meals. Have it centered in the morning. Okay. And the basic intervention, if you walk away with this for yourself, for your patients, eat 25 to 35 grams of protein at breakfast, and it can be transformative to life. And I believe this is what we have time for today. And I think that finishes our protein section. Okay. Ah,
I'm here. I'm just slow.
okay.
So thank you very much, Paul, and thank you for again the dealing with the cookie internet. We have some really great questions which I've collected in a Google Doc here, which I'm going to get to in a minute. How's your phone battery hanging in there?
Oh, my phone battery's fine. We
Okay,
should be
good.
great.
Okay,
As
good.
long as the internet holds. But
So I mentioned at the beginning of the program that I have invited Paul back to BotanicWise, not just to share this free webinar, but to also offer a 6-week program called Nourished, Fundamentals of Herbal Nutrition. And before we get to a little preview of the program, Paul, I just wanted, well, first let me share with you, Paul, why I asked you to teach this program. And that's because I took an audio version of the program, driving around in my car, listening to Paul's voice and trying not to fall asleep, but absorbing and relaxing and learning and loving it. And for me, I'm a chiropractor and an herbalist, have been since 1994. And when I first graduated, I graduated first from my class. I thought I was Miss Smarty Pants, and I got into my own clinic and started having people come in with real life problems. And I found out I didn't know diddly squat. And then I had to deal a little bit with imposter syndrome, but also use my smarts to start trying to figure so many things out. For example, a really common thing coming in, a postmenopausal woman with declining bone density. What's the right protocol for that? Take calcium, right? Knee-jerk reaction. Take calcium, magnesium, there's all this information. And at that time, the internet was just being born, right? It wasn't much of a thing. It was dial up. And pretty quickly, the internet was burgeoning with conflicting information, with overwhelming information. And I think from 1998 to now, it's ridiculous. So the short story here is Paul's course taught me everything I wished I'd known when I graduated. Like that, I feel like everyone, whether they're a practitioner or just somebody who's interested in maintaining their own health, needs the accurate, authentic, science-based and experience-based information to get the answer straight. So now 25, more than 25 years later, I'm taking Paul's course and still learning things, even though I'm pretty savvy at learning a lot of things on my own. So I want to thank you for that, Paul. And I'm really excited to get this version where we can ask Paul questions, where it's in video format, where it's live. And then I wanted to kind of throw the question back at you, Paul, and just ask you, what was your incentive? What was the main purpose that drove you to develop this program?
The material in this program, I developed to train my herbalists to use nutrition in the clinic. Right? And I would like to say I developed too much information. I developed it's like a 650-hour curriculum right, that to produce clinical practitioners, and that's used in 3 different schools. But the people come to herb school, right, and they're thinking in the herbal paradigm. They think, I want to take this herb for that and everything. So sometimes it's hard to educate people, to bring them over to understand that the foundation is dietetics, right? Because maybe they became an herbalist because they thought, oh yeah, I love plants, and just like me, right, love plants, but they don't quite get that dietetics is the driving force. And then also, I've learned, I like to say, it's like practical experience. What I've seen, we've been in teaching clinics now for like 28 years. And so each case, we take it and we discuss it with the clinical faculty and the other students, and we see the outcomes. We see what works and what doesn't work. And we've been doing that now for 28 years. So everything in this program, everything I said today is experientially based. I've watched these changes happen in my student body, and then watched them teach these changes to the patients in the clinic and seen them get the same benefits. So this was my motivation, was to train professionals in dietetics, and it's just as useful for an individual, right? I like to say, you could be an herbalist with one patient that's yourself, right? And then you can expand and do your family and friends, right? But don't, because you're using something to maintain your own health or your family's health or something, doesn't degrade the value of the significance of what you're doing.
So,
Okay.
I also wanted to ask you another question, if I may. When I was talking with you about developing the program Nourished, you mentioned that the material is firmly grounded in experience. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the experience is, as a teacher, I've been teaching this nutrition to herbal practitioners, and I've also supervised their cases in the clinic, where you get to see, well, they recommended this dietary change to this patient, and then on follow-up, either the person did it or they didn't. If they did it, what was the outcome? I've been doing that in teaching clinic. We started doing that in 1996, and so the method there is that the student practitioner, they're an intern at that time or a resident at that time. They're seeing a patient on their own. They write up the case, right? But then the clinical faculty and the other practitioners basically jump on that case like dogs on a piece of meat, right? And analyze it and study it and see what they can learn from it. So as a community, we study each and every case that comes through our teaching clinic, right? And I'd say by now, I've probably done that with maybe 4,000 cases in the last 28 years, and have seen, both in the students have seen the outcomes and in the patients seen the outcomes. So this is what I mean. It's based on experience.
So I have another question.
I love, there's a statement in the tracking community: if you track alone, you're always right. So this is, I never do this alone. We're doing this in community. We have 2 or 3 faculty review and comment on each case and see each other's comments. So
Okay, so while I ask the next question, Abby, could you pull up the preview of the program? So we have a great question from a student of our previous program with you called Food for Optimal Health, which was talking about food intolerances. I'm wondering if you can give a short little explanation about the difference between this program, Nourished, and Food for Optimal Health. They are not the same. That's the shortest.
No, it's interesting that I had that quote from the Hippocratic treatise called On Ancient Medicine, right? And in there, they mention each person needs an individual diet, and they mention for some people, some foods will cause disease that it won't for somebody else. And then they also mention that you need sufficient quantity and to be able to digest it. So I would say the food intolerance course is about identifying foods that cause inflammation and induce disease as part of your diet. And then this course is about what to put in, not to what to take out, what to put in, what to make abundant, what to enjoy, what to take ad libitum, what to do to support your, really support your optimal health through nourishment. So it's the process of nourish, but then remove irritants is the basic approach since the time of the ancients. So the two go together well, but without
Yeah,
a
they
lot
really
of
are companion programs, part 1, part 2, except either one could be part 1. It doesn't need to be in one order or the other. That was my experience. Okay, so Abby, do you want to take us on a little bit of tour of the curriculum? And that will show some of the differences between the two programs as well.
Sure.
So we're
Go
gonna,
ahead.
yeah, I'm just gonna say we're gonna have our usual format for our 6-week programs, which is Paul shows up live on Tuesdays. He'll be teaching the core material. He's also going to be teaching some more core material on Thursdays because this is more in depth than just 6 sessions. And we do have the live classes so that you're incentivized to come to class because you get to ask questions and it's just fun to be there as a community. But you will have access to the recordings as always for as long as you need them. There's no expiration date on the replay availability. So we start on April 11th, and you can see looks like the 3rd week. Yep. And then, so there is so much material that Paul had to share with us. We decided to offer some of the not excess, but the beginning introductory material as a pre-recorded audio recording so that as soon as you jump into the program, you can get started, getting the background for where he's going to start in the first class. So that's what these bonus pre-recorded audio classes contain. And then we always love to have guest speakers, and we have one of my favorite teachers, Tammy Sweet, and my other favorite teacher, Chris Hobbs, and Paul's one of my favorite teachers too. So they're going to go together really nicely and complement each other. And Chris will be teaching about fiber, and Tammy will be talking about hydrating so that you actually absorb the water you're drinking and don't just pee it out. And here is just, Abby's highlighting the coupon code that does expire on April 2nd. It'll save you $76, and the code is nourished76. You don't have to do it all uppercase, I don't think. You can just type out nourished and then the number 76, and that will be a nice savings on the program. A little bit more, let's keep going, and then I'm going to get to the Q&A in just a few minutes. We've got some great questions to share. So I'm just sharing this little moment here. I've been talking about Parkinson's, which I personally deal with on a daily basis, and seeking to support my health through nutrition. And I've been talking with Paul about it, and also Christopher Hobbs. I think they look adorable. My little cartoon version of them. Both of these herbalists have me thinking a lot about what I eat. That's for sure. And Paul emphasizes the value of prioritizing the foods we eat above the herbs we take. That sounds shocking, but really what he wants us to do is lay a really good foundation so that the herbs don't mask the issue, but instead they can really do their marvelous magic with full integrity and effectiveness. And I watch out for Paul's big knife there. And then Christopher Hobbs nods, saying, I bet you could eat more fiber. He loves fiber. So he's got me eating up to 40 grams a day of fiber. And he'll talk a lot more about that. So I've been experimenting with it, and I think it's working. That's me dancing. Another Parkinson's therapy is dance. So there I am trying to dance. So let's, Paul, are you still there? And then we can jump into the Q&A from the material that you presented. I have a list here that I'm going to open. Is he still there? Uh-oh.
I'm not sure. I'm not seeing him.
Oh, I feel so sad. Hang on, folks, while we see if he reappears. And if you need to leave, bye, Kim. Thanks for showing up. We understand. But if you'd like to have your questions answered, hang in there and we'll see if we can get him back on. I'm going to text him. I'm going to see if I can call him, Abby.
Okay. And for all the folks watching the replay, you can find the course at BotanicWise/nourished. Sorry, BotanicWise.com/nourished. Kate, you can find the full schedule on the registration page. All classes begin at 7 p.m. Eastern. They're on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The code for the discount is nourished76. And yes, stars, we all loved your pink coat post. If you're interested in seeing that, you can find us. You can find the video on BotanicWise Instagram, the BotanicWise channel. She posted a reel. It was really good. Thank you for your patience, everyone.
He's not answering. I feel terrible. I don't know what happened.
I'm not sure. It's real life, right? He's kind of
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Thanks for liking my horrible dancing experience. You have no idea how hard that is. It's ridiculous. But the glitter helped. Yeah. That's right, Polly. I'm glad we're still human too. We're not all AI beings. Well, I think the best solution here is to, oh, Lisa, you want to say something? Can you let her unmute, Abby?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Everybody.
Lisa.
I wanted to say hi. You know, Paul trained me when he trained me to take over the school. He trained me in a bunch of this stuff, and it's just so cool to see how he keeps up with the research. And back when I started working with him back in 2004, and he was, you know, saying basically the same things based on the evidence that he had at the time. And it just keeps, he's so brilliant at interpreting the significance of these studies. And he just keeps, you know, reading, you know, I don't know how he finds enough hours in the day, honestly. He must just absorb studies, you know, just by osmosis or something. But it's really cool to see how it's developed over, you know, the past, how long has it been since 2004? A while. How the new studies just keep reinforcing what he was teaching back then when I first started, you know, spending time with him. And it just keeps building. The evidence keeps building that you know, not only is the protein really important that he spent a lot of time with, but all the stuff that he teaches about nutrition. He's
Yeah.
just the person I know that probably knows more about that without prejudice, you know, for one kind of diet or another kind of diet or whatever,
Right.
than anybody I've ever learned from. So I just want to say, if anybody is considering taking a class with him, I would absolutely 100% do it. You know, and even though I've been studying with him for almost 20 years, I still show up and listen to him when, you know, whenever I have the time and I get a chance, because that's how much of a master he is. And he's so humble about it. He won't brag about himself, but I'll brag for him.
Yeah. Yeah. While we're embarrassing him behind his back,
Yeah.
I just want to share, you know, right before the webinar, he was stressed out because he was driving around and looking for internet and feeling under the gun, and he didn't want to have to reschedule this because so many
Yeah.
people were involved. And then he just took a deep breath and he said, "Oh, you know, I just am here to serve and I want to help people. This is what a great opportunity this is for me to help people."
Nice.
And he really means that.
Yeah. That's Paul. Oh, another little Paul story to share with you guys, just for fun. The reason I became the director of the school when he decided to retire is he was going to close the school in Boulder, NAIMH. And I was just like, no, you can't do that, because he pretty much saved my life, you know, by helping me understand what was going wrong with me, because I was diagnosed with MS. And then I was re-diagnosed with Lyme disease and then some other thing. Like, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, but I was having really serious chronic inflammatory problems. And Paul talked me in to understanding food intolerances and what an inflammatory trigger certain foods can be, and like how it can mess up your immune system. And he talked me into, and I thought he was a nut at first. It was great. I was super skeptical because I'm a science nerd, right? But he talked me into doing a dairy elimination and showed me like the procedure, because it's a big thing, you know, before and after symptom scores, hidden sources, blah, blah, blah. And the first time I did it, and I felt about 70% better than I'd been feeling, which was pretty serious. And I was skeptical. I'm like, well, maybe that was going to happen anyway. And so I did a washout period, and I did another 6-week elimination and re-challenge. The same thing happened. And I did it 3 times to prove it to myself, because I didn't want to give up my beloved cheese. And at the end of that, I was like, oh, clearly this man knows a lot more about this topic than I do. I need to, you know, take his advice and learn from him. And, you know, so he's really, I don't know, one of my beloved elders, and I respect him so much. And, you know, he really did pretty much save my life, because they were like, oh, we need to give you these drugs and these other drugs, and like, let's poke this thing in your spinal cord, and, you know, all the stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's another one of my missions, is to take what these elders, you know, to respect what these elders have learned over the years, the experience and the science that they've studied, and help them bring it to more people. And he's so grateful for that, because that's not really his savvy thing to do. And so that's where I can come in and support him. And archiving, you know, we're archiving these classes, and I just feel so grateful to have the opportunity to capture it.
Yeah, he's a treasure, and he's so humble, and he's very spiritual and very humble and very scientifically straight on. It's like a really interesting combination. So
Yeah.
I just
Thank you,
had to
Lisa.
give Paul some plugs while he wasn't listening, because he might.
Oh, well, I am giving up on him. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to send him this document with your questions. And we will post them in the community, and also try to post it via email if Abby can figure that out. My sincere apologies that you didn't get the question, the opportunity to hear his answer verbally. I'm very, very sorry. I'm not sure what happened to him. Maybe his phone battery died, or he lost receptivity for the phone as well. But he wasn't having an easy connectivity night. That's the way it is, I guess, in Portland, Oregon tonight. But thank you for your patience and understanding, and thank you for being here to the bitter end. Love hosting these events, and it's nice to see your faces. It's been a while since we've been together. And I hope to see you, if not in Paul's program, at our book club that's coming up and on our next movie night. We have lots of fun activities that are less of a commitment than a 6-week program. But I know that if you can do the 6-week program, you will not regret it. So thank you all. Have a beautiful rest of your day.